Assassinations have rewritten the destiny of nations. From emperors to presidents, a single bullet, a hidden dagger, or a sudden strike changed the course of history forever. These were not just killings. They were turning points that shaped wars, toppled empires, and gave birth to revolutions. In this documentary, we uncover the top 10 famous assassinations that changed history. Shocking stories that remind us how one life taken can alter the future of millions. When one death changes the world, history is full of powerful events that shaped the world we live in today. Wars, revolutions, inventions, and discoveries all played their part. But sometimes history changes in a shocking and sudden way, through assassination. An assassination is not just a murder. It is the killing of a leader, a king, a president, or a famous figure whose death can change the course of an entire nation. One moment, the person is alive, holding influence, power, or hope. The next moment, everything is different, and the future is rewritten. Assassinations are different from ordinary crimes. They often carry political, religious, or social meaning. The people who commit them usually believe they are serving a bigger purpose, maybe to fight against tyranny, to stop an enemy, or to make a statement that the world will never forget. Whether we see them as heroes or villains, assassins always leave behind consequences that reach far beyond the act itself. Imagine a world where President Abraham Lincoln was never shot. Would the United States have healed from the Civil War in the same way? Or think about Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. His assassination in 1914 lit the spark that started World War I. A conflict that destroyed empires and changed the world map forever. These events show us that one person's death can set off a chain reaction, sometimes leading to peace, but often leading to chaos, suffering, and even more bloodshed. Throughout history, assassinations have often been carried out in public places, theaters, parades, temples, and even city streets. They are acts meant to shock, to send a message that no one, not even the most powerful, is untouchable. In many cases, the killers were motivated by anger, revenge, or political beliefs. Sometimes they acted alone, while at other times they were part of secret organizations or movements. But assassinations are not only about death, they are about ideas. They show the power of individuals to challenge systems, governments, and rulers. The assassin may fire the weapon, but the ideas behind the act live on. That is why we still remember these stories centuries later. They remind us of the fragile balance of power and how quickly it can collapse. In this documentary, we will explore 10 of the most famous assassinations in history. Each one was more than just a tragedy. It was a turning point. From Julius Caesar, whose death shook the Roman Empire, to John F. Kennedy, whose assassination shocked the modern world. These stories are dramatic, unforgettable, and deeply important. Some brought nations closer together, while others divided societies for generations. This journey through history is not only about violence, it is about the lessons we learn. It teaches us that history can pivot in a single instant. It shows us the cost of power, the dangers of hatred, and the heavy impact of human decisions. Most of all, it reminds us that leadership carries both hope and risk. So, as we begin this countdown of the top 10 famous assassinations that changed history, prepare yourself for tales of ambition, betrayal, courage, and tragedy. These are not just stories of death. They are stories of how one act can shape the destiny of millions. The assassination of Julius Caesar. When we think about assassinations that changed history, the death of Julius Caesar stands near the very top. Caesar was not just a Roman general. He was a brilliant leader, a man of ambition, someone who transformed Rome from a republic into something much more powerful. But his hunger for power and the fear that he might become a king or even a dictator for life led to one of the most famous betrayals in history. Julius Caesar had won many battles for Rome. He expanded the empire, conquered new lands, and gained huge popularity with ordinary Roman citizens. People loved him because he gave them land, jobs, and festivals. He also forgave his enemies instead of killing them, which made him appear merciful. But at the same time, senators and nobles grew suspicious of his growing power. They worried that Caesar no longer respected the traditions of the Roman Republic, where leaders were supposed to share power and follow the Senate's authority. In 44 BCE, Caesar was declared dictator for life. Too many senators, so as a sign that he wanted to make himself a king. Rome had once overthrown kings, and Romans were proud that they were ruled by a republic, not by one man. A group of about 60 senators decided to take action. They believed they were saving the republic by removing Caesar. Among them was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man who had been like a son to Caesar. Brutus's involvement would make the assassination even more shocking. On the Ides of March 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar walked into the Senate building. He had been warned by fortune-tellers and even by his wife Calpurnia, who had dreams of his death. But Caesar ignored the warnings. As he entered the hall, the senators surrounded him. At first, they pretended to greet him, but then they pulled out their daggers. One by one, they stabbed him. Ancient writers say he was stabbed at least 23 times. When Caesar saw Brutus among the attackers, he is believed to have said, "Et tu, Brute," meaning "you too, Brutus." These words symbolize the ultimate betrayal. Caesar's death was supposed to save the Republic, but instead it threw Rome into chaos. The conspirators thought people would cheer them as heroes, but the opposite happened. The Roman people loved Caesar, and they were furious. Riots broke out in the streets, and soon Rome was divided. Instead of peace, civil war erupted. In the end, Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son, Octavian, rose to power. He later became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Ironically, the assassination meant to protect the Republic actually destroyed it and gave birth to the Roman Empire. The story of Caesar's assassination teaches us many lessons. It shows how fear of power can lead people to drastic actions. It also proves that sometimes killing a leader does not bring peace or freedom, but even more violence and change. Julius Caesar's murder is remembered not only because of the dramatic way it happened, but also because of its lasting impact on the world. Rome would never again be the same after that fateful day. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The 16th President of the United States is remembered as one of the greatest leaders in American history. He guided the nation through the Civil War, a terrible conflict between the North and the South. He believed deeply in the idea of freedom and worked hard to end slavery. But his vision of a united and equal America cost him his life. His assassination in 1865 was not just the death of a president, it was a turning point for the entire nation. The Civil War was a bloody struggle. The northern states, called the Union, fought against the southern states, which had broken away to form the Confederacy. The main issue was slavery. The South wanted to keep it, while Lincoln and many in the North wanted it abolished. After 4 long years, the Union finally won in April 1865. Lincoln gave powerful speeches about healing the nation and rebuilding peace. His famous words, "With malice toward none, with charity for all," showed his desire for forgiveness and unity. But not everyone shared his vision. Many Southerners were angry and bitter after their defeat. Among them was John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and a strong supporter of the Confederacy. Booth believed Lincoln was a tyrant who had destroyed the South's way of life. He hoped that killing the president would inspire the South to rise again. Booth was not acting alone. He and his group planned to assassinate other government leaders too, including the Vice President and Secretary of State, in an attempt to throw the Union into chaos. On the evening of April 14, 1865, just days after the Civil War ended, Lincoln went to Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. to watch a play called Our American Cousin. He was seated in the presidential box with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and 2 guests. During the play, Booth entered the theater. Since he was a famous actor, no one suspected him. He made his way up behind the president's box. At about 10:15 p.m., Booth stepped inside and shot Lincoln in the back of the head with a pistol. The theater erupted in panic. Mary screamed and one of the guests tried to grab Booth, but Booth leapt from the box onto the stage. Although he broke his leg during the jump, he managed to shout, "Sic semper tyrannis," which means "thus always to tyrants," the motto of Virginia. Booth then escaped out the back door and rode away on horseback. Meanwhile, Lincoln was carried across the street to a small boarding house. Doctors tried everything they could, but the wound was fatal. And the next morning, on April 15, 1865, Abraham Lincoln died. He was the first American president ever to be assassinated. The impact of Lincoln's death was enormous. People across the country wept. In cities and towns, bells rang, flags were lowered, and crowds gathered to mourn. His assassination shocked the nation at a time when it needed healing the most. Instead of unity, the country was thrown into deeper pain. Booth was hunted down by Union soldiers and killed 12 days later, but his act had already left permanent scars. Lincoln's assassination reminds us that even the most powerful leaders are vulnerable. It also shows how hatred and anger can destroy hope. While his death was a tragedy, Lincoln's vision lived on. The United States eventually continued his mission of ending slavery and building a more equal society. Today, Abraham Lincoln is honored as a symbol of freedom, courage, and sacrifice. His assassination, while tragic, made him a martyr in the eyes of history, a leader who gave his life for the ideals he believed in. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Some assassinations do not just change one country, they change the entire world. One such event was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. His death in 1914 did not simply end a life. It set off a chain reaction that exploded into World War I, one of the deadliest wars in human history. This single act turned local tensions into a global conflict that would kill millions and reshape nations forever. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. That meant one day he was supposed to become emperor of a vast empire in Central Europe. He was known for being strong-willed and for having his own ideas about how to rule. Unlike many in his government, he wanted to give more rights to different ethnic groups in the empire, such as the Slavs. This was unpopular with many Austrian leaders. But it also made him a target for nationalist groups who wanted independence from Austria-Hungary. One of these groups was the Black Hand, a secret Serbian nationalist organization. They believed that Bosnia, which Austria-Hungary had taken control of, should belong to Serbia instead. To them, Franz Ferdinand represented everything they hated about Austrian rule. Killing him, they thought, would strike a powerful blow for Serbian freedom. On June 28, 1914, Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie traveled to the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia. It was supposed to be a peaceful visit, but the Black Hand had prepared an assassination plot. Several men were placed along the Archduke's route, ready to strike. At first, things did not go as planned. One assassin threw a bomb at the Archduke's car, but it missed and exploded nearby, injuring bystanders instead. Franz Ferdinand continued the visit, determined not to be frightened. Later that day, however, fate intervened. After changing their travel plans, the driver of the Archduke's car took a wrong turn and stopped right in front of another assassin, Gavrilo Princip. Princip was only 19 years old, but he carried a pistol. Seizing the moment, he stepped forward and fired 2 shots. One bullet hit Sophie, and the other struck Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Within minutes, both were dead. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for supporting the terrorists, and within weeks they declared war on Serbia. This might have been a small war, but Europe was already divided into alliances. Russia supported Serbia. Germany supported Austria-Hungary. France and Britain joined in against Germany. In just a matter of weeks, the whole continent was dragged into a massive war. What began with 2 shots in Sarajevo became World War I. The war lasted for years and caused unimaginable destruction. Empires collapsed, millions of soldiers and civilians died, and the map of Europe was redrawn. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand showed how one act of violence can set the world on fire. Princip, the young assassin, wanted freedom for his people, but instead he caused suffering on a global scale. Today, historians look back at this event as one of the most important turning points in modern history. It reminds us that political violence can have consequences far bigger than anyone imagines. The death of Franz Ferdinand was not just the end of a man. It was the spark that lit the flame of a world war. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is remembered all over the world as a leader of peace, truth, and nonviolence. He led India's struggle for independence from British rule, not with weapons, but with peaceful protests and the power of his words. Gandhi taught millions of people that change could come without bloodshed. Yet in a tragic twist of history, this man of peace was killed by violence. His assassination in 1948 shocked not only India, but the entire world. Gandhi was born in 1869 and spent his life fighting against injustice. He became the leader of India's independence movement and inspired millions with his simple lifestyle and strong belief in nonviolence, which he called ahimsa. Through marches, boycotts, hunger strikes, and peaceful protests, Gandhi challenged the mighty British Empire, where he walked for 240 miles to protest the British tax on salt. These actions brought international attention to India's fight for freedom. In 1947, after decades of struggle, India finally won independence. But freedom came with a painful price. The country was divided into two nations, India and Pakistan. This partition led to violence between Hindus and Muslims. Millions of people were forced to leave their homes, and riots broke out across the land. Gandhi, heartbroken by the bloodshed, worked day and night to bring peace. He fasted, prayed, and traveled to calm angry crowds. His mission was clear. He wanted unity, not hate. But not everyone agreed with Gandhi's vision. Some Hindu nationalists thought he was too kind to Muslims. They believed he had betrayed Hindus by supporting peace with Pakistan. Among them was Nathuram Godse, a man who thought Gandhi's nonviolence was weakening India. Godse believed that killing Gandhi would remove what he saw as an obstacle to Hindu power. On January 30th, 1948, Gandhi went to Birla House in New Delhi for his daily evening prayer meeting. He was 78 years old, but still active. As he walked through the garden, leaning on the shoulders of two grandnesses, Godse stepped out from the crowd. He bowed before Gandhi and then pulled out a pistol. At close range, he fired 3 bullets into Gandhi's chest. Gandhi fell, his hands folded in prayer, and according to witnesses, his last words were, "He ran," calling out to God. Within minutes, the man who had preached peace his whole life was gone. The news of Gandhi's assassination spread across India and the world. People cried in the streets. Millions attended his funeral procession, walking for miles to pay their respects. Leaders from around the globe mourned him. Albert Einstein said, "Generations to come will scarcely believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." Gandhi's death was not just India's loss. Although Gandhi was killed, his ideas lived on. His philosophy of nonviolence inspired other great leaders, such as Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States and Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Gandhi showed the world that courage is not always about weapons, but about standing firm for truth and justice without hate. His assassination reminds us how dangerous intolerance and hatred can be, and how even the most peaceful voices can become targets. The assassination of John F. Kennedy is often called JFK, was one of the most popular presidents in American history. Young, energetic, and full of hope, he inspired millions of people with his speeches about freedom, progress, and a brighter future. He became president in 1961. At a time when the United States was facing big challenges, the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the fight for civil rights at home, and the race to land a man on the moon, Kennedy gave people hope that America could overcome all these problems. But his life was cut short on November 22, 1963, when he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. His shocking death left the nation in grief and changed the course of American history. Kennedy was just 43 years old when he became president, making him the youngest man ever elected to the office. He spoke with charm and confidence, promising to lead America into a new frontier. He pushed for space exploration, asking the nation to commit to landing a man on the moon. He worked to improve civil rights for African Americans, though progress was slow. And he stood firm against the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the world came dangerously close to nuclear war. Through it all, Kennedy remained a symbol of youth, energy, and hope. On the morning of November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was visiting Dallas, Texas, as part of a political trip. He wanted to connect with voters and strengthen support for his re-election campaign. Riding in an open-top convertible, Kennedy sat beside his wife, Jacqueline, with Texas Governor John Connally and his wife in front of them. The motorcade drove through cheering crowds in downtown Dallas. The atmosphere was festive. People lined the streets to wave and take pictures. But just after 12:30 p.m., as the car turned onto Elm Street near Dealey Plaza, tragedy struck. Shots rang out. At first, many thought it was fireworks, but the truth became clear within seconds. A bullet struck President Kennedy in the back and then in the head. Governor Connolly was also badly wounded. Jacqueline Kennedy, covered in her husband's blood, cried out in shock. The car sped toward Parkland Memorial Hospital, but doctors could not save the president. At 1:00 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. He was only 46 years old. Within hours, police arrested a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. He was accused of firing the shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, which overlooked the motorcade route. 2 days later, however, Oswald himself was shot and killed on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. Because Oswald never stood trial, many questions about the assassination were left unanswered. This fueled decades of conspiracy theories. Some people believed Oswald acted alone, while others suspected larger plots involving the CIA, the mafia, or even foreign governments. The nation was left in shock. Millions watched Kennedy's funeral on television. His young widow, Jackie, became a symbol of dignity, while his little son, John Jr., saluted his father's coffin, an image that broke hearts around the world. Kennedy's assassination marked the end of what many called Camelot, a time of hope and idealism. The assassination of John F. Kennedy reminds us how fragile leadership can be. One moment, he was waving to crowds. The next moment, the country was leaderless. His death left deep scars on America, not only because of the tragedy itself, but also because of the unanswered questions that remain to this day. Kennedy's words, dreams, and vision for a better future still inspire people. But his assassination remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most important voices for freedom and equality in the 20th century. He believed in justice, fairness, and peaceful protest. As a leader of the American Civil Rights Movement, he inspired millions of people to stand up against racism and discrimination. His dream was of a nation where people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But this dream was cut short when he was assassinated in 1968. His death shocked the world and left a wound on the fight for civil rights. King was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. From a young age, he saw the unfair treatment of African Americans in the South. Laws known as Jim Crow kept black and white people separate in schools, buses, restaurants, and even bathrooms. These laws denied African Americans basic rights. King, inspired by his Christian faith and the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, chose a path of nonviolence. He believed peaceful marches, speeches, and boycotts could bring real change. In 1955, he gained national attention during the Montgomery bus boycott, where African Americans refused to ride buses until segregation on public transportation ended. Over the years, King led many famous protests, including the March on Washington in 1963, where he gave his legendary "I Have a Dream" speech. His words moved hearts around the world. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership and commitment to justice. But while millions admired him, not everyone agreed with his vision. Some white supremacists hated him because he threatened the racist system. Others, including even some within the black community, thought his nonviolent approach was too slow. King also began speaking out against the Vietnam War and poverty, making him a controversial figure in politics. By 1968, he was both deeply respected and bitterly opposed. On April 3, 1968, King arrived in Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers who were demanding better pay and working conditions. That evening, he gave a speech known as "I've Been to the Mountaintop." In it, he spoke almost prophetically, saying he might not live to see the promised land, but that the people would reach it someday. His words gave hope, but they also carried an eerie sense of farewell. The next day, April 4th, 1968, King was staying at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. Around 6 p.m., he stepped out onto the balcony outside his room to talk with friends. Just then, a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck him in the neck. King collapsed, and people around him screamed in panic. He was rushed to the hospital, but less than an hour later, at just 39 years old, Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead. The killer, James Earl Ray, was captured 2 months later after fleeing the country. He eventually pled guilty, though many conspiracy theories have surrounded the case, with some believing others may have been involved. King's assassination devastated America. Riots broke out in more than 100 cities as people mourned and expressed their anger. Yet at the same time, his death pushed the government to act. Just days later, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which banned housing discrimination. His legacy lived on through the movement he had built. Today, Martin Luther King Jr. is honored with a national holiday in the United States. His speeches are still studied, and his dream continues to inspire movements for justice around the world. His assassination silenced his voice, but it did not silence his vision. Instead, it reminded the world that the fight for equality is long and difficult, but also worth every step. The assassination of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was one of the most powerful and controversial leaders of the 20th century. Like Martin Luther King Jr., he fought for the rights of African Americans, but his approach was very different. While King believed in nonviolence, Malcolm X believed that people had the right to defend themselves by any means necessary. He spoke with fiery words, challenged racism directly, and called out injustice without fear. Many people admired him for his courage, but others saw him as a dangerous threat. His life came to a tragic end when he was assassinated in 1965. Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little in 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His childhood was filled with hardship. His father, who was a preacher and supporter of black rights, was killed when Malcolm was young, possibly by white supremacists. His mother struggled to raise the family, and Malcolm ended up in foster homes. As a teenager, he became involved in crime and was eventually sent to prison. Prison, however, changed his life. There, Malcolm educated himself by reading books and studying history. He also joined the Nation of Islam, a religious group that taught black pride, self-reliance, and separation from white society. When he left prison, Malcolm dropped his last name Little, which he said was a slave name, and replaced it with X to represent his lost African heritage. As a minister in the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X became famous across the United States. He was a powerful speaker who drew huge crowds. He spoke about the suffering of African Americans, the violence of racism, and the need for black people to stand strong and independent. While Martin Luther King Jr. preached love and integration, Malcolm X's words were more radical. He criticized white society harshly and said black people must protect themselves, even with force if necessary. This made him very popular among some, but also very controversial. By the early 1960s, Malcolm X began to grow apart from the Nation of Islam. He disagreed with some of their teachings and with the leader, Elijah Muhammad. In 1964, he left the group and started his own organization. That same year, he traveled to Africa and the Middle East, where he visited Mecca for the Muslim pilgrimage known as Hajj. This trip transformed him. He saw Muslims of all races worshiping together, and he began to believe more strongly in unity. He softened his views on race and started to promote peace and brotherhood between people of all colors. But this change also made him enemies. Leaders of the Nation of Islam felt betrayed and saw him as a rival. Malcolm knew his life was in danger. He often told his friends and family that he did not expect to live long. On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X was preparing to give a speech in New York City at the Audubon Ballroom. As he stood before the crowd and greeted his audience, chaos erupted. 3 gunmen rushed forward and opened fire. Malcolm X was shot multiple times in front of his wife and children. He was only 39 years old. The news of his death spread quickly. Many were devastated, while others felt that a strong, uncompromising voice for justice had been silenced. In the years that followed, his ideas continued to grow in influence. Young activists in the Black Power movement saw him as a hero who had taught them to be proud of their identity. Today, Malcolm X is remembered as a complex and important figure. His early speeches on black pride and self-defense inspired strength, while his later vision of unity showed growth and wisdom. His assassination cut short a powerful life, but his words and ideas still inspire people fighting for justice and equality around the world. The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin was a soldier, a leader, and finally a prime minister of Israel. Spent most of his life in war and politics, but in the end, he became best known for trying to make peace. Rabin believed that peace between Israel and its neighbors was possible, even though the Middle East had suffered from decades of conflict. His assassination in 1995 was a turning point, not just for Israel, but for the dream of peace in the region. Rabin was born in 1922 in Jerusalem, when the land was under British control. As a young man, he joined the military and quickly rose through the ranks. He played an important role in Israel's War of Independence in 1948 and later became Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces. As a soldier, he believed in protecting his country with strength. But as he grew older and became a political leader, he began to believe that lasting security could only come through peace. In 1974, Rabin became Prime Minister of Israel for the first time. His leadership was not easy, and he faced many challenges. But it was during his second term in the 1990s that he made history. Rabin worked closely with U.S. President Bill Clinton and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat to sign the Oslo Accords, a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. For the first time, both sides officially recognized each other and promised to work toward a peaceful solution. In 1994, Rabin, Arafat, and Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts. Many people around the world celebrated this moment as a step toward ending one of the world's most violent conflicts. But not everyone was happy. Some Palestinians believed the deal gave away too much, while some Israelis felt Rabin was betraying his people by making compromises. Among those who opposed the peace process were Jewish extremists in Israel. They believed the land should never be shared and that Rabin was putting Israel in danger. One of these extremists was a law student named Yigal Amir. Amir strongly opposed the Oslo Accords and decided that killing Rabin would stop the peace process. On the night of November 4, 1995, Rabin attended a large peace rally in Tel Aviv. Tens of thousands of people gathered to support his vision of peace. After the rally ended, Rabin walked down the steps toward his car, smiling and holding the papers of a peace song that had just been sung in his honor. Suddenly, Yigal Amir stepped forward and fired 3 shots at close range. Rabin was hit twice and rushed to the hospital, but the doctors could not save him. At 73 years old, Israel's prime minister was dead. The assassination shocked Israel and the world. At his funeral, leaders from around the globe gathered to honor him. Bill Clinton gave a famous speech, ending with the words, "Shalom Haver," which means goodbye, friend. In Hebrew, for many, Rabin's death marked the end of the best chance for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. After his assassination, the peace process slowed down, and violence soon returned. Rabin's assassination reminds us of how fragile peace can be, and how hate and extremism can destroy hope. He gave his life believing that enemies could become partners and that war could be replaced by understanding. Even though he was killed, his dream still inspires those who work for peace in the Middle East today. The assassination of Benazir Bhutto was a trailblazer in world politics. She was the first woman to lead a Muslim-majority country when she became the Prime Minister of Pakistan in 1988. Intelligent, bold, and charismatic, she was admired by millions of people both inside her country and around the world. But her life was full of struggles, controversies, and danger. On December 27, 2007, she was assassinated in a shocking attack that changed Pakistan's future forever. Bhutto was born in 1953 into a powerful political family. Her father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was also Prime Minister of Pakistan but was executed after being overthrown in a military coup. From an early age, Benazir showed great intelligence. She studied at top universities like Harvard and Oxford. When she returned to Pakistan, she entered politics to continue her father's legacy. In 1988, after years of military rule in Pakistan, elections were finally held. Benazir's party, the Pakistan People's Party, PPP, won, and she became prime minister at the age of just 35. She was young, modern, and gave hope to many Pakistanis, especially women, who saw her as a symbol of progress. However, her time in power was not easy. She faced strong opposition, accusations of corruption, and struggles with Pakistan's powerful military. Twice she was removed from office before completing her term. Despite the setbacks, Bhutto remained a popular figure. She lived in exile for several years, but returned to Pakistan in 2007 to run in upcoming elections. Her return was dramatic. Crowds of supporters welcomed her, but she also faced threats from extremists who hated her progressive ideas and her fight against terrorism. On December 27, 2007, Bhutto was campaigning in Rawalpindi, a city near the capital, Islamabad. She had just finished addressing a large crowd of supporters. She stood up through the sunroof of her car, Smiling and waving to the people, disaster struck. A gunman opened fire, and then a suicide bomber set off an explosion near her vehicle. The blast was powerful, killing Bhutto and dozens of others. News of her death spread instantly across Pakistan and the world. Her supporters filled the streets in grief and anger. Many believed her assassination was not just the act of terrorists, but also linked to deeper political plots. Even today, the exact details of who planned the attack remain debated. But one thing was clear: Pakistan had lost one of its most important and inspiring leaders. Bhutto's assassination left Pakistan in turmoil. Riots broke out, businesses closed, and people feared the country would sink deeper into violence. Yet at the same time, her death sparked renewed energy in her party and among her followers. Her son and husband carried forward her political legacy. Though Pakistan's politics continued to be unstable, Benazir Bhutto's life and death carry many lessons. She showed courage by standing up for democracy in a country where politics was often dominated by men and controlled by the military. Her assassination was not just the killing of one leader, it was a blow to the hope of millions who believed in her vision. But her legacy still inspires women, reformers, and dreamers who want to build a fairer and freer society. History is full of turning points where just one assassination changed the destiny of nations. But which one do you think had the biggest impact on our world? Julius Caesar in Rome? Abraham Lincoln in America? Or maybe Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan? Tell us in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey through history's most shocking assassinations, don't forget to hit the like button, share this documentary with your friends, and subscribe for more powerful stories from the past that still shape our present. Remember, history is not just about the past, it's about understanding the world we live in today. So stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video.